Hello and welcome back to another video. Got what I think is a good topic for you guys to talk about, and these are my biggest tips and pieces of advice for new landlords and property managers. And so these are lessons I've learned throughout my experience as a landlord and a property manager, and things that you want to, avoid the school of hard knocks on these things, because it could turn out expensive and it could really ruin the, real estate or rental property experience. And so let's get into number one. Number one, and I can't stress this enough, and this might sound simple, but it's that important, is that you need to have a written lease. Have a written lease. Because if, God forbid, you have to go to court, you're going to be so much better off if you have a written lease. Because everything's set in stone, it's written out, your guidelines are there, the judge can look at that and make decisions based off of your lease and the terms in your lease, versus if you have an oral lease, it's just he said, she said, and it just muddies the waters for no reason. It's not that hard to have a written lease. You can get one online, like the North Carolina Real Estate Commission one is one we have here. I think every state really has a commission like that. You can have an attorney write one, go to your local RIA club and ask somebody for one. It's not that hard to get a written lease. Read through it, understand it, know your terms in your lease. It doesn't have to be complicated, just have it, and you'll be very glad that you did, and hopefully you'll never have to find out why. Number two, great tenants at lower rent is better than a higher rent and a worse tenant. I'd far rather have some awesome tenants at a little bit below market rent than having to constantly keep renting out a unit every 6 months because tenants break their lease, or they're shitty tenants and they just destroy the premise after however long. I'd much rather have less money per month and great tenants that take care of the property, and it's like a good partnership between landlord and tenant working together, because it'll really pay off in the long run to have a lower rent and someone great that's living in and taking care of your property. So don't underestimate the value of good people at a lower price, because if you list your unit for rent under market a little bit, we're not talking $200, we're talking about $25, $50, maybe $100 depending on what market you're in. But if you're listing your unit for rent at below market rent, just below the market level, then you're going to get more applicants, in which case you'll have higher quality applicants applying to rent your property, and you can really screen through and get your pick of the best applicant per se. And so it's a lot, it pays off in the long term. Number three, landlords have, there's a stereotype about us. Sometimes we get a bad rap, and I think it's important to understand that sometimes tenants just need to be heard. They haven't always had good landlords like me and you, and so sometimes when they're frustrated or they're struggling with something, they live there. They're renting to live there. It's not a business for them like it is for you and me. It's their life. It's their livelihood. And sometimes if they're frustrated about something or whatever, sometimes they just need to be heard and understood, and know that they're not the victim. You're not a bad landlord out to get them. You're really trying to work together in a partnership and provide a great product to your customers in this case. And so sometimes people just need to be heard and understood, and you can get along a lot better. Whereas a lot of landlords don't want to hear it. It's just pay your rent and leave me alone. And don't really have a problem with that. But it is a partnership between you and the tenant, and you want to make that partnership a good partnership and a long partnership, because you don't want to have turnover, because that costs money. And so sometimes people just need to be heard. And number four, which kind of relates back to number three, is your tenants, they're renting from you, but it is their livelihood. And I believe that they deserve to feel safe and happy and secure with where they're living. They shouldn't be unhappy with where they live. So you should do your part as a landlord or property manager to make sure that the people who are paying you rent every month, they're happy with where they're at. They're happy with their living conditions. And I don't mean, if it's affordable housing or Section 8 or something, not Ritz-Carlton treatment, but, let's do no mold, or let's have no bug issues and stuff like that. So, hold up your part as the end of the landlord or the property manager, and really make sure that you're providing a good product for these people, because it is directly correlated with their livelihood and their happiness and where they might be raising their families, and where they're spending a huge amount of their monthly income, which is going to you. So I think it really pays off in the long term to provide a good product, but not only understand that it's directly affecting these people's lives. And so it's important to provide the best conditions that you can in order for them to be happy, in which case you'll be happy. So number 5 is complete repairs in a timely manner. And this one's another one that's probably a given, but a lot of times, tenants report stuff and landlords never do anything about it. And then we've had properties in which case where we'll buy a property from a landlord who's like that, and then we come in and the tenants don't expect you to do anything, and so they get all bitchy when something breaks. And so, you really have to build that trust back. And it goes back, all these points are kind of interconnected, but if you fix repairs on time, then it's generally cheaper for you because, let's say it's water damage, the sink's leaking, you don't fix it. Well, that just hurts you as a landlord, because the water problems are just going to exponentially grow and compound the damage. But also, not everything that sounds like a repair needs to be repaired. So I think it's also important to have the knowledge and be able to explain to your tenants that, hey, that's not actually an issue. It's just a characteristic of maybe an old house or a mobile home. Like, these things just kind of happen, and it just is what it is. So I think that's important to know the difference between what is an immediate repair and what maybe actually isn't a repair that the tenant thinks is kind of a big deal. And I think that goes back to, if you have that trust, you can explain that, and you're still on good terms with your tenant, and they remain happy. They just get educated on the issue. Number 6, don't be afraid to push back if your tenants are really pushing you about an issue. I think it's important to not, it's a bit of a give and take relationship. But if your tenants are really pushing back about something, like, some people have ridiculous, like, they'll want the driveway shoveled, or they want, new gravel on the road every 6 months. And it's just like, depending on what bracket of housing you're providing, like, some of that stuff's not realistic. So don't be afraid to push back, about the issues that you need to stand up for. And lastly, number 7, which is vitally, vitally, vitally important as well. In worst case scenario, if you do end up going to court with your tenant or against your tenant, it's important to keep a record of your communications, your important and your vital communications. I'm not talking about like, oh, hey, I just dropped rent off, at the office or whatever. I mean, like, hey, the sink's leaking, or the heat stopped working. It's important to keep a record of those communications, because let's say you go to court and you're evicting them on non-payment of rent, and they're like, well, we were going to pay the rent, but they didn't do this that we asked them for, and they didn't do this that we asked them for, and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's like, if you have your record of communications, you can say, well, actually, I tried to send someone out to fix that, and you wouldn't let us in. Or, we actually did fix that, and you never told us that it broke again, or stuff like that. So it's very important, if you ever have to go in front of a judge or anything like that, to have your important communications and records like all neatly organized. The best way I found to do this in a simple way is I have like a Google Sheet, and I'll have a tab for each property, and then I'll have let's say it's like a multi-unit property, so I'll have like the name of the property or just the address, and then I'll have like the unit numbers on the sheet, and it'll be like 701, Jill on this date requested this. Maybe she requested that the screen door be fixed because it wasn't swinging right or whatever. And so I'll have that request in there, and then I'll have a record of it being fixed in there with dates and times. Or if somebody texts me and complains about something or something's broken, I'll take that and I'll add it to the sheet. And it's a little bit of a annoying process to kind of go back and forth like that. And if it's on text, maybe you just save all your text messages and do it if you ever have to. But it's important to have, records like that for the worst case scenario. And it's really not a whole lot of effort to keep track of that. And you'll be glad if you ever have to use it. And so, yeah, those are my 7 tips for new landlords or property managers. And I hope you got something out of it. If you did, love to get you to like the video. And if you want to subscribe and stay tuned for more content, we do real estate stories here. We do informative videos like this. And who knows what else is to come. So yeah, appreciate you taking the time, checking it out, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.